Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes
Howe ki mo e hamata pōre whewhe ke taitale rea ki mo tonu ki he paenga e wā ke tari whalau e aho whakakoa koe ni pēa neongo ku mo moko atua mo kei sinau pēa mo ngā i uta ka o ku maa whana upito pēa loto pēa whewhe ke taitale rea hene a Dr. King Langi ki he programa tu mao koe au tawanga maheni ki ai he wike ua me wike whaa kotoa pē pure lulu kotoa pē ai koe pelula ke mamao Kingi, malo mu ai tu taimi ka e lava mai mi sore ki ke whahoko e programa i provo.
Malo bito a whai o maare koe ni ku mai ke whahoko ki programa koe ni tāna mai ni kai. Pea pui a te mo hoiki ka mai hamata pūre mo ha lotu. Mo tu taimi mo whawhanako mai ki programa tu ma ko ia ku finga ke whakahoko ke lava pe ke whaha whipotala no aki. To lava pe ke ia hangahi mea ke mahino ke ki tau tolu ngahi whaunga tauhi o tongi tau whai ke ki tau tolu mo tau whanau mo whanamua puna ka mafu ke whamiri mo ka inga. Uinga ke tau ilo mahu inga o e tauhi koe ni ge mo ile rei e lava ke tau mau whainga maari ke tau tokoni ke whaamiri me whanua kakai ka mawhoke anga himea ko tau pia ke tau whakahoko he mo ini koe ai ku whamalatu ke wake tari whalau koe a koe programa koe ni pea tau whenga pe ke whai he whaunga maa taha mo fonga fai mo fua taha ke mahino ya te tau tolu ai hinga o to tono ai ki tau tokanga ki fahinga me tokoni o fatupu mahamahaki pea mangahi mau me tokoni ku fatupu mo ulerei pea tau whakawhiowhianga ki he mau me tokoni o whatu mo i rei i tau mau ngahi mea tokoni ku ne hanga tāke kina ki tau tōru ka ngahi mahaki ai kuia i whakapalanga chronic diseases ai chronic diseases ku ne hanga whatupu tamate tangata lahikaha i mamani tau te whito ki Amerikani i he taimini pa koe ngahi bobo tala noa koe ni, tala noa ki he ngahi whaunga te tau lawai o whakahi ehi, me he ngahi mea te nhanga tāke kina ki tau tōru, ke hoko a ngai whatu tā mai koe ni, kai ki ngata beka te ki tau tōru, maa whuka me tau whanau, me whuka mkopuna ka maa whuka whaamri he on katoa.
Koia, kou sehi fo ki, o koe acronym for all o ku, aia koe SAD, he? Kau nofo ia kūmi pe ko haa koe SAT, ta koe Standard American Diet ia. Aia o kune. Koe mahuga whaketa po ka mau ta tānoa he taurea, pea e toi mahino ngō fuangi ai. Ka pau kua hau whihu i peke tuku mai pe i he lotonga polo kāma, i he Facebook a ka pau ke loto, pea ka i kai pa ke text mai ke wau noa taha tau taha noa, whanoa no noa. Ka lava tari atu ho whihu i mo whai ha pou pou. Koe taha ia e mea mahu inga ta polo kāma, o kwhai i he taurea, pea mahino ngō fuangi ai. Hai. Kua talawa ino tala noa ki he suka, pea hoko kia e toto maalunga, pea tari pea mo ngahi whehui, kua whai mai, ko pehe koe hoko atu koe ni, whakatahai ai suka mo toto maalunga, tā noa rewa ki he, kai hae ngahi mea, te lava o whai ka pau ku te o si maa ki tai ngahi chronic disease. Aia koe whehu i toko lahi ia. Whewhe ka pau ku o si suka uia. Koe haa nai haa ku mea e whai ke toi whakarerei ia ngea e ku mo ui. Koe whehu ia tahane o mai. Ka koe mana tui ai tangata eiki. Na e kurerea te sāpate. Ko mana tu e tangata e ki o tā mai koe la vea hono vae o se mahina e wau te kai peke saia. Na e lahi au pito suka e tangata e ki. Pea aia koe palo pare maia. Whekau he toke tā ke wharerei e ni maumea tokoni. Ke tuhifo e suka ke lalo kai kai. Ea o peke ha taimi e tu usea e vae. Pea iri fia e tangata eiki. Ka hiri wea o kulotonga kai pe ia mui musota. O ku kai ngahi mea ko o ku whakatupu au e suka ke o ngā mui musota. Kau whukia he mea o ku mawe tahae au e suka ke o ngā i musota. Fu meria au pito. Anai hao pou ki he whehu i koe ni. Ka pau te o si mau te suka pa koe toto maalunga. Ka haha te mea e lawa ke whai. Pea hange pe mea te tato te whoki pe o repeat e ngahi o mea kau sai pe whoki hono toi repeat ke toi mahu inga ke nau tōru ko nau toki kau mai ke polo kalama. Koia.
Malo pito awha whihui ko ni whihui mahu inga pito e nia puk tau stala noa kei ki mua. Ta whenga peke to e repeat e mea ta tau. Ka ode mo futokanga mo tōru ke he tō repeat e ngahi mea koe ni. E koe lao ia koe o e ako. Ko pao peke te to hanga repeat, pa te repeat, pa te to repeat. E pehea he kau professor ko ngau whai ngahi ako matao tau. Now pe repetition is the law of learning. Aia koe lao ia koe o e ako. Ke te tō hanga repeat, pakai ke ngata pe ai, ka koe tamu te repeat e ku e whanga ki elemeniti ai hoto ata mai ku koe butons, pa koe tamu ko lahi koe te repeat, ko lahi e whangi butons pa koe loloa nge te manatu, pa toe loloto nge te whakaukau, a ngahi mea ko te ako ki ai. Kai kehe, koe moni au pito whihu ia koe ni, na tau si ako pegi tau tolu e awha tau hanga te repeat e me tau pehe, koe ngahi chronic disease. Koe hae chronic disease ko ngahi mahaki o kuru tau mau, kono hinga a pe koe whaunga e tau mau me toko ni. Pe ngahi chronic disease koe ni o koe suka toto maulunga koe arthritis, autoimmune diseases, o ngahi mahaki o tau o tau ngali dio pe ko ngahi mahaki tauhi mahaki tauhi aia ko ngahi mahaki ko ni ko ha e te mea e whai ke tokoni lahi taha kita o ka pau te mai ngai mahaki ko ni kainga o kui kai peke te oiaha to e mea te whama mawha lahi a te mo tolu ko tau whaunga mau mea tokoni ko ha ngai mau mea tokoni tau mau mea tokoni me ai tau es whamatala ki ai ko ngai mau mea tokoni tau whanga kui whenga mau peke manatu ki ai o na tukuanga ia ke mea ki tau tolu ui ngahe koe tuunga koe o mea kai he tainu tau manatu e koe ke tau mau mea tokoni koe tonga koe ke te fufaha li riu ia mea kai koe ne fu i haupe koe me he ngowe fufulu ai mono ki tere mo kiri alu ki ai mo ki loloi pe asko ia pa hakare vai ia osko ia lere ki ai mo ki lai luo li o lunga pe asko ia kono to ai mo ki foi ni o ki loloi aki pa kono to mai ko ia o mau mea tokoni me ai ta whakatanga pe ko mau mea tokoni kauia ngai mau mea tokoni whamo uire rei au pito kesi no e anga koe tau e sio koe he taimini koe ki ai pa koe ngahi mau mea tokoni koe ni te hanga o to mea ki tau tolu ai waweang e tau mau e suka ko toto mau lunga ko e obesity tau sisino pe tau mau ngahi arthritis ya o pe ke kauti langa ke hui au ke he whengatange tau lue ke tau lue ka feitu he lawave pe kai ke ngata pe ai foki ka ko taimu tau whenga ke ako hafa hinga mea ke tau mana tu e ki tua yang e kono hinga pe mana tu ko ai ka lawa ko ni ulah yang nga hinga ko te ai pa ne hanga o uesia ai horisi ko ka lawa pa ko au horisi ka madi ko ka lawa ko ge ngata pe au ka lawa ko fua au ke ka lawa e mata au ke ka lawa e ate au ke ka lawa e utoha ngai ko fata ko so na fai pa ko ngai ka lawa ko ni no hanga fetuku ngahi nutrients po ngahi mau me tokoni ke tauhi ake ngahi me mipa ko ni ke na ngau lelei ka kui kai ke whakahoko ia ko nui ngā o ku lahe ngahi mea ku fu ngako ngahi mea ku lahi protein lahi pa moe ngahi suka o ku tahonga whakao ngai o lava ke hoko ia mau pe koe piki ke horisi whanki kālawa i loto pe ne whatupu rewa ngai mamaki koe ni kai ke koe whakakatoa i e tau popo tala noa ka whahinga mau me tokoni o kui kai ke ne hanga whamuri rei sino alu ke sino pa ku ne hanga wei a sino ke nau whaiha ai feohi a ngahi me mipa koe ni pe koe ngahi mau me tokoni koe ni o ne whakatupure waia ai whahinga kemikare o ku piki pe hokore waia o whakafoi holise e ka lava kai ke ngata pe ai kai toi matolu ange pa kai ke lava ka lava o ngaue o nge koe o toton ke ngaue ki ai e taimu alua e toton ke o lunga pe a lava lewa ke hoko ngai whatu ta maki koe ni kai ke ko hae me utau talanoa ke ko tau talanoa ni ke mo uile lei a whaki ka lava ko ni whetuku e toto whetuku mo mea kai ke me mi pako toa sino o kai ke wholahi le rei to tonu ke hange ko ne firma ana tula ka toi foi ke hange ia ko ngā ko lahi ngahi suka mo ngahi ngako mo ngahi protein ko ne hanga o whaka pete hanga whaka matolu horise ka lava whangi ka lava ko ni o hokore wai ngahi parema ko ni whakatoa ko tau sino
koia aia kono aia tahaki te lau pe tau ka pau te ono i fuulahe te mau mea tokoni kaua e kakano i manu ton bege ai pe te whaui ke taho off au pito pe ki tau ke te kaiha kakano i manu Ai ko fia ke ma me to ko ni tau whanga kui na to ki whai pe kai le rei ke sāpate pea ka pau te kai pe ki tai lai pere pe koe lai lu I holotonga wike o ku kei fu whawha ofa au pito ia
Whangawha ofa au pito ia ka kai ni unau pe he o to tonu ki tau kai kiki he taim ko toa pe I kai o kui kai ko mo ni ia ko hau ki animal protein I ko au to tonu ki hau tai ta pe pakapai tuku pe ke sai pe ke mai protein fe unga pe tau tolo me ngai lai a kau mo ngahi fua koe a kau foha koe ngau e te tau maa tātore protein fe unga alo ke pesete e hongo fu tupu ai ko se unga pe protein ko ya ko hau ka protein ko me kakano I manu le rei he pesete ua fu tupu ke tolu ngo fu lahi ia
ko ia
ko ne hau ko ia rewa ai ko taimu ta honga o mau me toko ni me ngahi mau me toko ni ko ni o fu fra tu ta maki au pito ia ko no nga na wan ko ke si no kai ke ngata be a lot of protein o inflammatory we nanga fa tupe fe pulu si ka to ala te mo ngako ni hanga fa piki holisi ko kalawa o to tana ki anga ia ai fanga ki elemenitu o te atu he toto o whakalahi pe ia kono whakafosi e kalawa o whengata arewa e pamo e mafu ke mo vete toto ke sino
ko ia ai ku ne hanga rewa o to wesia pe mo e mafu he time tatau
ko ia ko ia ai ko tau pepe ke ne foi ke kalawa u ngako whenga rewa e mafu ke to fute o lahi ange u ngake te ke e toto ke alu ke whaki me mipa ma maa taha koe me mafu
ko ia
e ne hoko koe e fute koe e mafu koe ia mana tui koe mea e koe toto maalunga kono inga koe maalunga e toto fute whake mafu whinga ke puhi e ai toto ke lere whaki ka lava u toe fōi ki ange o toton ke wholalahi ka lava ka fōi ki ange koe ngā koe tau mau mea tokoni mea ngāko ta ko mea rewa hoko alo toto ki o lunga hao e pe ki langa ulu hao e pe ki mamaria nga koe te ngā ue pe hao pe foki ke he atamai ki mamaria whakaukau kai ke mama le ai ko I lo pehe klase ni o se na mau ba to ko dinga ke fata ko se no fai fu kai la ko te foi to ko ta te pe to o ki mohe nga me fe ma ko si no ta ingo ya fe ma si no ke mohe nga he gwe me a lahi ku fe nga ngai mo si no fe ma si no ke to me kai ko ya ki tu ko nga ka lava ke function le nga hindeave mo ngahi mo atamai ke whakaukau rei lo pe ki tau tolu koe ne o se ngahi kai whaafe mo ngahi mau mea toko ni fulahi e whaingata ke whaiha stati e o se ngahi mea koe ni koe ngā whoku si ala toto kai ke whiunga toto au ki he uto pia si hange uku ki maamari e rewa e ngāwe e uto pia ko mea rewa hoko o e fia mohea pe haure va venga te moe pa wa ngahi me mi pa sino me fu fia mau ha toto ke aluatu ko kai ke fe unga e toto o aluatu e usia e mo le ngahi me mi pa ko ia sino
ai au totomu ke tau foki ke mau me toko ni tau whanga kui pe whale rei I pe tau kai pe e toko ni ngā nau tōru kōku o si mao he suka holoki ai suka mi I he nau toto Ngā me ai au maho inga ke holoki mau pe tauhi mau pe ki he re volo le rei ke mou le rei mau pe sino Niongo pe ku o si diagnose ki tai au mau suka ka u te whenga mau pe ke tuhifo mau pe suka ki lango ai gono ai tuku atu inu sota mo e kai askirimi mo ngahi mea merie ka te he kai ke te mate ki tai ka pahe ke te mao ngahi mea koia ka te tauhi le rei ia kai ke hano kovi te moui tai kai ha askirimi he nā tau moui le rei pei tau tolu ki mua pato ki hae askirimi ka kua oifo foke askirimi
Kai whake ngata pe awha ngai mea melie ko ia, mea kai melie ke ia, ka tau mana tu, koe ngako. Koe ngako kuni hanga whakatupu koe suka. O flahi ange ai ue sia ho tau sino tau mau mea tau koe me ngako. Koe suka, i tai ngu hao suka me ngai fo ia apere mo ngai whaki mea whanatula ko ia e sai pe. Ka koe mea koe ki ngako, hao koe ngako o alu koe sino, koe ngako uni anga whakatupu ai suka, koe manatu koe ngako uni alo tāpu ni whaki matapā koe o kuhanga he insulin na whakawa ke huki loto suka ke whakaonga e muscle cells ke hoko maua EV.
Koia.
Aia ka whangaki reaction ku glycolysis, whangaki reaction mu tawako pe elementary au laki ki high school ngahi me aia kune hanga o tutu i ngahi mea kai ko ni ki hoko ia ko iwi ki ta hoko whaamai.
Aia koe salova anga palopare ma o kai koe tuku hifo pe ai suka mo i kai ngahi mea pehe ka toi whakarere i e mau mea toko ni koe ngako.
Koia.
Pea waifu ki lahe taimia ku hifo whake whakapaku sipi.
Koia.
Pea whanau mao pe ko manatu e whaarea e mātu ani. Masi koina kua moho e ngako i sipi. Ai au toton ke tau toka ngai ai ngako he koia au ne whai e palopare malahi.
Palopare malahi au pito. Ai au hao ngai ngako mo ia hao ia me he kakanui manu.
Koia.
Ui ngai meu tau toka ngai ke kakanui manu. Kai ke ngata pe awha e hao e ngako ko ia. Ka koe protein products ko hao mi ai. Whatupu inflammatory reaction i he sino. Pe alama ke whatupu ia ngai mea lahi. Mana tui koe ki tau ilo ka kato ki tau tuke ngai mea katoa ko ia. Ka hono tātā naki whakataha. Tau ilo, koe mau mea tokoni me kakanui manu o fulahi. O fufatu tā maki a pita e kisino.
Koia.
Oke ia ai mo uile leu. Tau sio peke Amerikani, u tau mau mea tokoni me kakanui manu fu. Hange koe lau e mai toa whau wa, Koe mau mea tokoni koe a awha. Te tau sio peke hanga koe tuunga mo uile leu ko Amerikani. Koe tau tolu whakamole lahi taha. Tau peke 80 billion. Ia, tau whamore lahi taha, kau tau tungu mamaki lahi taha.
Koia.
Sio ke COVID-19, o hambea kuhoko, ko tau tolu, lere e tau ngahiu mea ka ko tau tolu o ku COVID taha, outcome ko COVID, Mehe u, whakatatau ke u whanua katoa.
Koia.
Tau sio peki ai, ko toe mea e taha ke tau maratui, ko e McDonald's loe mo Kentucky Fried Chicken to whawhaua,
Koia.
Ai si mau mea tokoni a kakai, ia i pe kakai, kai ke nau mau mea, pehe kau Amerika toku a ia, koe lahi koe meeting to tonu ke, mau mea tokoni me iai i he haua kai kotoa pe, Koe he lahi whakauria ia. Uinga mea tau mate ai whawhi tupu i he, kotoa pe, koe hara teki koe tupu me mau mea tokoni pehe.
Koia. Ko uaware se ifa ke acronym ko e SAD, O ko mea tu da ko Standard American Diet ko me masi. Ko hena ni hanga ai acronym ko ni fu. Ai ko tuhi fo suka, tuhi fo ngako. Ko ngako le te foki pe kita ke plant based.
Koia.
Foki kita ki ai pe a whalere i pe te. Ma o mea tokoni ki matai ika, toki whakahuhua pe. Pau rewa kua ha kakano i manu ngau e aki pea. Tonu peke te hanga kara au te fat layer, Ko mana tu i whaasio ma o pe ki he ngahi mea tokoni kau tamani ki pū māsima. Ai ko toa pe munu ngai fo i ngako. Po e taimi kou te hauta hifi ngako ko o tuku ke he veveu tamani. Masi ke toa ko e konga le rei a pū māsima,
A whako kuifo foki e ua, Ngai koe tau whatapu o sana whai, ka koe ka ko uhinga ku ifo o ku kai ko uhinga e bo ulelei ko me ai fo ko to pe ku kai ko bo ulelei e me ka to ko ia
Koia.
ko ifo pe ki heanga ko e te ho to wa ka ku ta wa ko ki ta to lo ilo ko ko ngai me ko ni e sai ka pau te fu fe kai ala ka pau ka ki te fu fe kai ala sa ka pe no tuku
Koia.
ka ta ngoi fo lo ka ai ko hinga fo ke ta ki po ta la no ko ni ko ha te me ala va ke fai ke te mo ui fo lo ang pa te malo ya no to sino
Koia.
ko me ko foi me to tonu e ta ui lo ko end product ke ta finga ko ta finga ke ta gi te ke ane e ta mo ui ke ki fu fo lo alu ke valu mo fulu hiva mo fulu pe ke te au e he time ta ta pe ta ke ma pe ho ta ui vi ke ta ngau e ta ka holo
Koia.
mo fai e ta ngai ngau wa no anga te mo ui lo tonga ia ko te me au fai ko foi to pe e mo henga mo ma me to koni mo foi to pe ke fa mea o ka ya ha no hinga lahi fu te fu finga ke me pe ko ai to no ange te to nga e to sino ke te mo ui lele pa te lava pe o functional
Koia.
ko time ko te liliu ko afa ke ma me to koni e fonga to no ta tau e pepe ku te tau fiha o ku kei benefit pe kita me to koni ko ia
Koia.
pe te tau teenage bu ka ko ki tau matu to pe te tau lo tau on go full fit go full val go full hiva go full o ku te kei benefit pe me fonga ma me to koni ko ia
Koia. He tamana tu e tau whanga kui. Tōre ke reka ka nau kei. Takai hala peo whai ki hua.
ko ia
Aile malo he au pito peo nau sino.
ko ia
Pea nau mo ui lelei. Pea kwai taimi nihu tau PC tau tolu heni. Kau kai ke totoni ke tau fu PC au pito. Ke tau hanga whatonga e tau kai mo whakarelei. E tau kai mo yanga e tau whio i whakawhamiri. Hangi ko lawe koe support ia go whie mau.
ko ia
Whetokoni aki. Pea whepopo aki. Pea tau lawa rewa mo ui lelei. Pea neongo pe ko diagnose ko ia soka mtota maalunga ka e whakarelei iai pe.
ko ia
He whetokoni aki ko ia.
ko ia ata ta no fuga fugi mo ke fatongia ko fae
Ko ia.
ke fatongia fae ko ki tau pe ko to ka ia familia
Ko ia.
ai ko no nga ku ne teu e fai to tonu pe ko me to koni to tonu ke si fa nga ke ni ki fa na mo hoa
Ko ia.
wa fae ko ke ne ilo ai fonga to tonu o kuki tau pe lai apita ngai ta po ki lai mo le me ki family ko ia ka ka pa wa fae ku ne ilo to tonu ke ngai mea to tonu ke tau ia ko ni family tau pe o ku kau he ilo mau inga taha e lava ke mau e ha fine mui ko inga ko ne teu ke nga tau ia ki family mo lele
Ko ia.
ko fatongi e tamai ko alo ngou e pe alo mai ai ha ko ai ki senit ke falera ke family ka ko fatongi maka tuki mahu inga taha o e fae ke ne ilo ai fonga o kuki o mau mea tokoni o mea tokoni whakamo ulele taha ki ene ki whanau mono hoa
Ko ia.
ka pao ia ha fae kai ke ne ilo ai whahinga ko ha whahinga kuki to tonu mo mea kai to tonu ki mo mea tokoni to tonu ki ono whaami tau pepe ko fu more lahi a whaami ko ia kai ke ngata pe whapaanga ka koe anga e fia pe mo whangi whanau e nau poto hoi ako e ku ilo he kai mirea koe tai mo alu koe whangi tamagi a whole food plant base o ku fu lele a pita nau ata mai na to alu ke nau tau siu ki ai o kai ke lahe ngā kōpea mua ngai protein he te ko he toto fu matata a pita ata mai he ako pa mua nau memory ana to fu lele a
Ko ia.
ai aku tau pehepe ko lau ko a Hippocrates let thy food be thy medicine let thy medicine be thy food ai aku tau pehe ko lea ko Hippocrates ko ia o whaka tau te fito ia ke whae mono whatongia ke tauhi whamiri ke mo ulelei. Pakapau ia ha whae wai ke ne poto i he kuki to tonu o mea takoni to tonu ke si i mo ulelea no whamiri tau pepe ku ngai fu mea lahi au pita tu si more me ngai whamiri pehe.
Ko ia mahu inga whukia e ngahi kulupu hangu ngahi kulupu i he ngahi ufunga waka ni hangi ka whine o wha nau whakataha o ako ki he kuki ko mana tu i mau pe ngahi kulupu hen mo ngahi kulupu ke he pe ngahi funga waka ke he ku kamata ke nau ngā hau e whakataha ai kakai whine ki he anga o kai ke ngata pe i he ngahi u mea kau ke ngatu mo e whala
kau taha langa whonua
koia
a kuin salote
kau ke mo e tau he api mo ngahi mea tokoni kau ia ngahi mea o ku whetrodi a ki ai haa whewhine a whawhine pea kau re rewa ki o nau ngahi api whetroni a ki ufuwhe mau au pito wahe i lo ka au e puke pe i lo.
Koia. Koe ki porkalama koe ni e maa mo ngā awha e whine o wha. Ki porkalama koe e kau whine o wha kou pehe koe fo i porkalama i to tonu ke ki whaka ako i ngā tolu ke nau poto. He koe mea koe lava peke a koe. Pa koe ke pehe ke fufu o loa. Ya ko pegi na to ko me una to ke na mau pa pe halo to ma la pa na finga ke na fikumi ko tu ko media e tai mini fu u le au bito ia ke cookie mo fonga to to ne fanga family ai ko available ko internet
yo au te la bida sia YouTube ya ngai cookie ngai u me kai
ka koe mahu i ngā pe, ke nofo i ngahi mea kai, ko whole food plant-based.
Koia.
Ko ki i wha mamao, me ngahi mea kai, o utuhau me whakamanu.
Koia.
Me kakano i manu, ko meat, ko dairy, ko eggs, ko ngahi mea ko suka, ko oil, mo salt. Ko concentrated e kai mea ko e taupea ko fui mea ono meat, dairy and eggs, pa mo suka, oil and salt. Finga e ki fui mea ono ka ke ki whaka si hifo. Ka finga whae ke ai ngai kuki koe mahu inga pia mo uile lei tahe whamiri. Pai a koe pia whamiri ia. E wai kai mea tau pefu ke tau tolu ia awha. Ka ngai mea toko nia tokua koe mitia koe mea ia kuifo. Koe ki totonu ke toa ia me te recipe koe te kuki. Tau pehe tai taha. Ka pau tau foki ke whonga mo uilelei taha o e kuki, mo e mea kai to tonu ke mau mea tokoni to tonu ke he whanau, mo nau poto taha ai, tau foki i whole food plant-based, pe o whakamoni whakatoka tā ngahi tau lahi, o mea pēni ko pressure me u kau taha, ka ku anu pe tai me awha, mā lia pe asi a mo o ni, he?
Koia.
Me ngahi mea kou to tonu ke whakahoko, ka kou pe he, ko ngahi whae, ko kia ke moilelea whamiri. Pa whakakatoa moilelea a kolo, whakakatoa moilelea a whanua. Ka pai nofa ngai whae, i he poto koe ni, pa nau teu e mau mea tokoni to tonu ke whawhanga ko nau ngai whamiri.
Koia.
Pe, angai ko tatalano ko he tangai prokalama koe ko si, tuku pe whae, ke hoko ia ko toke tā, to tonu ia ke whamiri. Ai ko taimi ko orake ko e mea kai o ta taupe mo fai to ko na ilo fa science mo ngai yako mata ta taimi u ha o ngai elemeniti ko ma ko me mea kai o trial of lere ta taupe ia mo ngai fai to ma mafata ha taimi di u ha pe e mea kai ia o na lere ta tau
Koia.
Whakatu o vare tau sio ke ngai pia pehe. Hau ngai mea tokoni o natula o lere tatau pia mo ngahi whaito o mamafa taha ko he taimini. O kuilo ko he ngahi he kau sainisi he taimini, no kau tukata
Koia.
ngā o research he taimini.
Ko taha fukia ngai mea unau whae tainimi ke toe reverse ko e diabetes,
Koia.
Toi whoki pe ia ke ngai elemeniti mea whakanatula. O maari au pitoe. Toa kon whakalere i pe ko toi whoki pe ke ngai umea whakanatula ne anga maheni ke e kakai.
Koia.
Ko sheifo he palani taha ke reverse he diabetes o ku whiga ulakia e sinamoni,
Koia.
Ka uia he mea kune hanga o wharerei e suka. Ka koe hangi ko whamatala. Aia koe whaungai e taha. Koe whaunga hono wā ke whakasisi e ngahi mea ke oil ba moe ngako.
Salt.
Yeah. Whakarerei ia pia kurerei lewa.
Koia.
Sei ke tukat mua taki fo i whasi e. Whakamaha mapa aki e.
We give praise to the King. Stood and ever faithful when my song was strong and free. Your name will lead us with your guiding light. Holding the love your God, we will stay loyal to the green and white. We give praise to the King. Stood and ever faithful when my song was strong and free. Your name will lead us with your guiding light. Holding the love your God, we will stay loyal to the green and white. ese pulato, ria nei kainalo. Amosia e muiaki, tena pori utumaki, kate poki a kita, ranga sepo katomia, ia tamalo tonga, kuna sepo okana, kui esi okakala, ie punga tauma, noko aria hona, noko aria hona, noko aria hona. Ie pule loa tonga, kakoni mui kakiuka, malo e te tamata, kakongi e tuolama, amosia e muiaki, tenga poli utungaki, kate poki a kita, ranga sepo kakongia, ia tamalo tonga, tena sepo kaanga, kui e siau kakala, ine punga taua, noko aria hona, 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 noko aria hona.
Malo pito king e ma uwhainga maari ke ta hoka te proklama pelula ki mamao i he efia fini pia koe mahu inga whakia e tau mua pelu e la ki mamao ka kuo mawhana e ta vahe vahe ka koe taimi ko taalo me taimi ko o se taimi wha osme i lewa kai o se ta proklama malo
Ngala pita awha e whenga maarega ni e whahawati ki pokalama e whiawhini. Pea nge koe ta ki whamamafa e whiawhini, tau pepe ta whamamafa ki whaamiri. Ka tau te whito ki whae e whaamiri. To tonu ke fu mahino ki ai whonga to tonu e teu e mau mea toko ni. He koe hao koe ki whaamiri ma mo tangata e kimi uta. Wene koe hapesi mea kai teu watu. Koala tiko e mea kai te watu, koe tuunga ia e iai e nau mo ulerei. Pea hange koe whanau koe ni ke he ako, koe tuunga ia e iai e nau ako, i he taimi o kute hanga he whae o teu ai mau mea toko ni totonu. Sai, koe haa lewa mau mea toko ni totonu, ue the whole food plant base. E u tau talanoa ke mo whamamawhai, tu o fiha, e u pehe koe sad diet, koe standard American diet, ta whamamao me iai. Whamamao me kakano i manu, whamamao me mea ufu suka, whamamao me mea ufu maasima, whamamao mea ufu ngako, tau tokanga pito ki he kakano i manu, holoke au pito kakano i manu, holoke au pito e huakau, holoke au pito fo i moa, ai ko ngahi animal proteins ko ni afa fatuta magi ko no ngahi ko ngahi inflammatory molecules ko ha no ngahi no fatu pe fe pulopulasi ko ha le ko ke fe pulopulasi ko ni fa va ve heart attack mo stroke fa va ve ngahi advanced glycation end product ai ku tupu ko he kofua mo ate ka mafoke atamai pe mo mata ngai mea ka to ko ni ka advanced glycation end product o fu mahuinga a bit pa ko rake ngahi ako he taimini o na hanga o from mama mai ka tik tau to ngahi mea ko ni ko no te tāna ki peia ke whole food plant based SOS free diet salt oil and sugar ta ko ngai mea ko ni hanga ko ta whaka mama whaafa fu mahuinga a bit o ia ngai ke ngata pe ngai whae he taimini a ko e whanau se fine o na teu ke tau ya ngai family ka hau to tonu pe ke mo wako ke mo mahino ya ngai mea ko ni pe tau pe ko ngai mea ko ni asige he fola la poto to tonu ke tau no foi ko nga ke tau mai ta po ke mo i le pe tau lo pe ko tonga ko fo no lotu tau tokanga ke ngai to hitap tau la wai tau ilo ko ngai mea mo ni tolonga ia ko ngai mea ko kai ke mo ni tau sio pege ngau e lahi ku whahe kakanu manu ko tau whonuani ne hanga tangmate ka kai toko lahi hoko kansa toto maalunga suka mga mea ka toko ni kono hinga fu whaware vare tau ma me toko ni me ngai ta whako ni ka ko whamo ke pe te tau ma haloto ma lalo ke ta whanongo ke ngai mea mo ni pa tau mui ai ko inga ka mau o tau ngai whaabria tā poake mo i le ka tau de fito ke whatongia o e whae i api ko mea ko whenga weke ki whama ma whae he whia whitipa ko le whamon mo rea tu ko wawa ngahi whakafua pu tai whiunga mo whakaukau po mo whamon mo rea nge au mo awha ki i programa ko i nika kuma whenga peke tātānaka ngai whamatala whiunga pia mahino mo fua ka ki tau tole ngai whae o ngai family tonga ko toa pe Amerika, New Zealand, Australia mo tonga pe mo ngai funua muri ko toa pe ke mahino ka tiki tau tolu ke mo foki ke whole food plant based ko me e mo le taha mo whanau ko me e te le taha nge ako mo whanau mo hoa mo family whakatoa
Ko ia.
Pito mo whanau mai o whatu
Io mawa o pito Dr. Kinglong ka toki hoko atu i he wiki hono wha whawhi ki mūtolo ki mūtolo mea mai hoka lewa po tānoa ki he hanga e he suka mo toto maalunga wesia ko ia ai kofua uhi ko e kamata lewa e ki kakato lewa ai ilo ki he hanga chronic disease ko ni mo harewa e te mea te lawa o whai ke whakasi isi ai mo holoki ai palopale ma ko ia mo whawhi ki mo toi mea mai pe i he wiki hono wha time tatau ki he programa pelula ki mamao ko mo mea
malo
ko ia okay ho eki mo e hamatapure fia ke tai re muto ki he programa whakaosi e poni aia ko e whatua meria ke mea utau e futerie mo tokata Thomas Halaki streamline mai pe me tau pepe ko Octet Newta Dr. Halaki fefea ke fiafini
Saipe malo fete hake.
Saipe oku momoko mo feitu
Io.
ki mawhana nge pia uiha ia kage fefea ke tai rea Dr. Halaki e fiafini pia te o angerewa whenga maari ki ai ke whahauka e ne presentation kan hoi mea ni au fu matu aki mahu inga ki ho whanau ho eki mo haa matapure pia kua e ne PowerPoint pa tau toki popo tala noa tu ai pe ai pia pau ku waha o whihui pia ke text mai ke u cell phone wau noa taha noa whanoa no noa kai whahauka tu ai pe ai whihui ka Dr. Halaki
Malo.
Io.
Kata ki whakamalo e ke lea whakapalangi. Ke kovi pe ku lea whakatonga. So, thank you very much for welcoming me to the program tonight, Dr. Palu. Afa, my friend, it's always good to be with you. Tonight, I want to talk about some issues that are important to both Tongans, Polynesians as students, and also Palangis as university faculty members and administrators. So I got some information from a couple of academic papers that were written, one from Anita Kiteao and from University of Utah, and another one from Nancy Martinson from San Francisco State University. They had some really good information, and I'm drawing most of my information tonight from those two papers. And the reason I want to talk about how important it is to support Pacific Islander students in the university culture, the university setting. Pacific Islanders are one of the fastest growing populations in the United States. They are the third fastest growing population in the U.S. And they're often referred to as the invisible minority because they're often not identified for who they are, where they come from, which is really unfortunate. The Islanders, as you all know, Afa, you have some unique challenges that many Palangi University students may not have. But you recognize that education is a big difference maker. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, education, as you have done well to get your education, has really changed the trajectory of your family and the opportunities that have come to your family. And I think that's true in any situation, but certainly for Pacific Islanders as a minority in this country, it really can make a big difference. But unfortunately, because the Islanders are such a small group, they're not well understood by people at a university, faculty members, administrators, and so forth. And because of that, they're often misjudged, and most detrimental, they're underserved at a university setting. Now, there are some universities that do well, or better than others, to support island students. San Francisco State University is one of those, and University of Utah is another one of those, and Brigham Young University is one. There are a few out there, but many universities are uncertain. They don't know about the island culture and some of the things that are important to those students. And at the same time, maybe as a result of that lack of support, many Pacific Islanders struggle to complete their college degrees. In fact, Tongans are at the top of that list. 54% of Tongans, as of 2011, so it's a little bit dated information, 54% of Tongans that started college never finish their degree. And other Polynesian groups fall in behind that. And so what we really need to look at is what educators can do differently to support these students better. And so that's what my presentation is about today, is really maybe talking to the wrong audience. We really need to be talking to educators. But I think as we, as those people who are supporting Islander students, if we understand the perspective where the university faculty members are coming from, then it may help us, may help those students that we support be more successful.
Yeah. I support the arguments you make. Me and Dr. Tonga, faculty of the Utah Valley University, and we always run into some faculties who they don't quite understood the Pacific Islanders the way that they so
yeah. And well, yeah, it's a different culture and different values.
Yeah.
And certainly nothing wrong with that, but it's just a difference, and so that creates a gap of understanding.
Yeah, and so far we have been able to make inroads in helping some of the faculties, and maybe because some of us, we like to sit at the back and don't participate. So we have talked to our students, sit in the front, put your hands up if you don't understand, and ask to repeat. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that and some other related things. But I want to mention that most of this presentation is geared towards faculty. So I'm going to use a lot of information that came from the University of Hawaii at Hilo. So a few years ago, they looked at their graduation rates and their enrollment rates of Pacific Islander students. They enroll a lot, maybe more than any other university in the States. They enroll a lot of Islander students. But what they found is that the Islander students had the lowest rate of retention first year and second year, which are the critical years to retain any student. And the Islander students were very low at Hawaii Hilo. And in addition to that, the Islander students had the lowest 6-year graduation rate. So they're allowing a student to graduate in 6 years, and that's when they start measuring the graduation rate. And the Islander students were very, very low. And what they identified is that part of the challenges for these students were a result of a lack of understanding from faculty about the island cultures, values, and backgrounds, and their styles of learning. And so the chart that we're going to look at today actually came from University of Hawaii at Hilo, that they put out for their faculty.
Yeah, I think it's still worthwhile to talk about it, even though it was geared to faculty. The more we know what faculty should expect out of us. And, unfortunately for some students at the university, I know them, I know their parents and grandparents, and when they don't show up, I give the father a call, and boy, they show up. So
yeah, but see, a lot of faculty, they're not familiar enough with the culture or familiar with the family like you are, and they don't have that background, they don't have that understanding. And so it's more challenging for them.
Yeah, let me know if you want me to change the slide.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump to slide number 4.
Yeah, we're on number 4.
About the other things, the other information there. So slide number 4 shows the 9 different areas that the university addressed in this chart that they sent out. And I want to go through these, as many as we have time for this evening. And
go ahead.
We'll talk deeply about some of these, and others we'll just kind of skim over, and that's okay. But let's go ahead to slide 5. And on slide 5, this is the first item that they identified, is the characteristic of Polynesian students for humility and respect, and how those characteristics are demonstrated. And that's the first column there that we say. It says may be manifest as. So this is the characteristic or the behavior of the student. And these things will probably sound familiar to you, Afa, and to many students. A quiet demeanor, listening without questioning, without speaking up, avoiding eye contact, responding always in a positive manner. And the example you gave at the beginning there was, sitting in the back, trying to be unnoticed. Those are all behaviors very common of Islanders. Nothing necessarily wrong with these. It's just the common behaviors. And we're stereotyping here, so we're not saying every student does all of these things all of the time, but they're common behaviors. And now the second column, as we look at the second column of this chart, this is identifying the way that these behaviors are often interpreted by faculty members, by instructors. So oftentimes those Palangi instructors, they will assume that a student exhibiting these behaviors are shy, timid, maybe they are introverted, they lack confidence, things like that, or maybe they don't understand what's going on well. Those things are assumptions, and assumptions more often than not are not true, and misunderstanding. But those are the ways that those Palangi teachers will often interpret this kind of behavior. And I think that's valuable for a student to know, and those of us supporting Islander students to understand this is how other people are interpreting behaviors.
Correct.
Either accurate or not. Right? And Afa, I don't know if you had any experiences during your education with any of this. Is there an experience that you can think of during your own education where maybe some of these behaviors
I do.
misinterpreted?
Yeah, I remember my biochemistry class with Dr. Simmons. He is a well-known man who first identified cyclooxygenase 1 and 2 and 3. And he asked me one day he said, "Why do you always sit at the back?" Because I'm always there first. And I said, "Well, I just come in and there's seat right there, so I take it." And he said, "Why don't you come to the front? Are you afraid that I will ask you questions?" I said, "A little." So I moved to the front, and he sure asked a lot of questions. And he always, after class, he said, "If you feel like I'm picking on you, let me know, so I won't ask you." But after that, I think the fear of being in the front was taken away, and he's a very smart man, but also very understandable. And he spent a little time in Honolulu, and so he understood a little bit of the culture, and every now and then he will speak a little Hawaiian,
Yeah.
and it was before a lot of people are afraid to go and ask him questions. I, on the other hand, because of that experience, I go ask him all kind of questions. So we become good friends, and he was very helpful to pass the class and understood a lot of the signal transduction pathways that he was interested in. So,
What a great example that is. And, first of all, Dr. Simmons must have been a very compassionate and understanding educator, someone who wanted to understand his students and took the time to invite you to sit up to the front, and look how that changed your education experience.
yeah,
Right? And what a more rich experience you gained because you have developed this relationship with him.
yeah, I have been a good friend. Wherever I see him, he always say my name, ask him how am I doing, how are things going, and I always do the same for him. He's a famous man, So
That's wonderful. So that's great that was turned out to be a very positive experience. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And some educators are not as patient and compassionate as he was, but they can be with a greater understanding. And I think that's the key here, right? Is the better we understand each other, regardless of our background, regardless of our culture, wherever we're coming from, the more we understand each other, then the more successful everyone can be.
yeah, and as a faculty, I come to understand that a lot more. The more you understand the students, the more you find out ways of how to get to the students so they can understand the things you're trying to teach them,
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we as educators need to be doing. And so we see in the third column on this chart here some suggestions for those instructors. And I think they're great suggestions, and they're things that even students could take to their teachers and offer these. Maybe they can offer this information to their teacher if they don't know. So in this particular case, the suggestions are for giving students an opportunity to meet individually with the faculty member. It sounds like you had that experience in your situation.
Yeah.
It might mean allowing students to submit questions in writing rather than raising their hand, so they don't bring as much attention to themselves. It might mean allowing students to work together in pairs to be able to talk about some of the assignments and the principles that they're learning, so that no one student feels singled out. And it sounds like in your experience, he tuned into that. He knew that could be the case, and that's uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Another thing that I found out, that when you go and talk, like Dr. Simmons, for example, grading papers. He give you partial credit if he asks you questions and you explain what you were thinking about, rather than just wrong and right.
Yes. Yeah. See, that's another technique that can be used, is to ask questions. Or, my wife, who teaches elementary school, sometimes she'll test her students and give them a verbal test, an oral test, where they can speak instead of having to write, because that's more comfortable for the student. So she just asks the one question, or the one student, a specific question, or for a few, and helps them answer the question that way. So being adaptable as educators, I think, is very important when we are able to do that.
Yeah, but you have to go talk to them so they know what you are thinking.
Yes.
And what's your need. I remember my wife in her time for the BA. When the exam time, my wife is always nervous. She knows the material, but she's nervous. So
Yes.
I told her, why don't you go talk to him and ask him for more time? And he will never go for it. And I said, well, you haven't asked. Go and ask. So she went and asked, and he said, okay, I'll give you half an hour more, things like that. So we have to talk to the teachers so they know who we are and what we're thinking about. And when we need help, ask for help.
Yes. Yes. Asking is important. I always say to my students and my colleagues, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
Right? And there was an athlete who said, you miss 100% of the shots you never take.
That's
right?
for sure.
When you ask, the answer might be no, but it might be yes. Right?
Yeah.
So your chances are better if you do ask. So let's go on to the next slide number 6, because we're kind of talking about some of those things already. This one talks about the importance of family and the reliance of the family support systems and social relationships that often are seen within Islander students. And that's very common because the family is such an integral part of the culture, in Polynesian culture. It's not always the case in the American culture, and which maybe is not the right answer for the Palangis. Maybe they need to learn a little bit more from the Tongans and Polynesians. But often what a teacher might see is a student being absent or late to class. They might turn in assignments late, or maybe they don't turn the assignments in at all. And excuses, they might see them as excuses that family responsibilities are a higher priority and are taking precedence over schooling. And that's in great conflict with the Palangi culture, where there's a sense of independence and personal responsibility. They don't rely so much on the family relationship. And so then what happens is the instructor will interpret the behavior there as a lack of commitment from the student, or might be interpreted as procrastination, poor time management skills, and a lack of individuality, and things like that.
Yeah, I
That's
think
necessarily the case.
I have seen a lot of those during the COVID-19, and I've talked to some of them because of a lot of them, they're a lot of late. And so what I gather from talking to these students, since they are not the one that got sick, the parents got sick, so they have to, drop off kids to school, pick up kids, and all of that.
Yeah.
Some of them end up working for money to help their parents out.
Yeah.
So those things that we gather was able to diffuse the thinking that some of those were saying that they're not serious enough yet.
Right.
You know.
And that kind of behavior is especially true among older siblings, right? If they're the oldest or second oldest student or child in a family, then it's more likely that they're going to have to adopt some of those responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And, you know, again, it's not a bad thing. It's, in fact, in many cases, it's very good motivation, but it's misunderstood because of the cultural differences. And so then adaptation needs to take place. And as Palanis, if we understand the importance that Islanders put on family, and we recognize that and appreciate that, then that will help in many cases to be able to adapt. But I think it's important also that instructors clarify and emphasize the expectations of a classroom while still balancing that with understanding and compassion about a family obligation or responsibility.
So it end up be that I asked the students, have you talked to the instructors about it? No. Well, you need to go tell him. That's the reason why you are always late.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they do not know. They need to know.
Yes.
So.
Yes. My wife has a question that she asks frequently in situations like this. She says, what else could be true? Right? When we make a judgment about someone and we assume something, she says, what else could be true? And that question forces me, when she asks me that question, I know that I need to step back and I need to look at the situation through different eyes. And I need to try and understand some differences. What could it be happening under the hood, under the scenes, behind the scenes that I'm not aware of? And so that's really important. So faculty members, you talk about communication and talking to the teacher. Teachers, instructors can make that easy by making sure that their students know how to communicate or can reach them easily. I give my cell phone number to all my students.
Yeah, so I do the same.
They text me. They have my email address also, but today's students, texting is a very common form of communication. So as a faculty member, I need to meet them. I need to be where they are, right? I need to make sure that they can reach me the way that they're used to communicating.
Yeah, I do the same, and I found it very helpful. Very helpful for the students then, I'm going to be late today because I'm working in Salt Lake. And I just get here safely. That's all it matters.
Yeah. Yeah, and really that's the important thing too, is that they are safe, right? I would hate to hear that a student was injured because they were rushing to my class to be there on time because I was so strict on that.
Yeah, and I'm a very strict teacher. And my wife told me that I become softy. And I said, no, I think I'm becoming a little wiser. So.
Well, it's a balancing act, and I think it's always it's better to start the semester being very strict, and then you can loosen things up as you go along if you need to. But it's hard if you start being soft and then try to get more strict later.
Yeah.
Good. Let's go on to slide number 7. The next one talks about inadequate pre-college preparation and academic experiences. And this is talking about the differences in educational systems. And this is a challenge, especially if a student is coming directly from the islands. Obviously, there's a lot of Polynesian students who grow up in the States, and they're a little bit more familiar, but at the same time, they're often living in a culture, in a neighborhood where the culture is very strong. Even though my culture isn't from the islands, my father was an immigrant, and I have cousins living in the United States in a small community where they have a lot of people from their own culture. So it's very easy for them to communicate in their native language. It's easy for them to access food that is familiar to them from their homeland. And a lot of behaviors and expectations within that small group are the same as what they would expect back in their native country. And so they aren't as strongly influenced by the American culture or the culture of the nation they're living in. Sometimes they still have a strong influence from their native culture. And so, but those students that come directly from the islands, as you well know, the education system is a little bit different in Tonga as it is from the United States.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's bad in either place or good in either place, but it's different. And so, tell us a little bit, Afo, what were some of the things that you had to adapt to coming from, you went to, if I remember right, you went to the Tongan government schools.
Yeah, from Atele. And coming from there to BYU Hawaii, where you speak entirely in English, and faculties do not go back to speak Tongan if you ask questions in Tongan.
Yeah.
So that was a shock.
Because they don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And then some of them say, "What did you actually say?" So differences in languages and the support system. You have to go to the lab for help in English. And the English lab instructors were Tongans born here. So they were very helpful. And not only that, but they understood us. So I think the language barrier was probably the number one thing. Second is how do you adapt to, I'll never forget typing. Typing was seen in the islands, especially for me, that typing is a woman thing, you know. So I'm not going to do typing, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But the instructor told us, trust me, once you learn how to type, you type all your papers and stuff. So after 1 week of being in a typing class, we were dismissed because we jammed up the typewriters a lot. We were given a Play-Doh to go home and practice on it because our hands were very tough, very hard, you know. So after 1 week of practice, we came back and it was way better. And I started typing my own papers and stuff like that. So typing is a very important skills that everybody needs.
Yes. See, you were such a better student than I was. My mother tried to get me to take typing class in high school, and I said, I don't need that typing. I don't need to know how to type. And look where we are now, right? We work on our computers and our keyboards all day long.
Yeah.
And we have to type, and I have learned to adapt, but I don't type correctly because I never learned how to do that. So yeah, that's a great example of some of those things. So as we talk about, you know, those education background differences, oftentimes they are manifest through low test scores, slow progress, incomplete assignments, things like that. Because really, if you're, in your case, and I remember when I was in Tonga too, I wasn't a student academically, but I had to learn to communicate in a different language while I was still doing the work that I was there to do. Right? So I was working a lot harder than the native Tongans, and that's the situation you were in when you went to college, right? You were not only working to do your homework, but you were also working to learn the language better.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're working a lot harder than other students taking the same class load.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges for me was learning to speak English without, like for example, like what we're talking now. At the beginning, I'll listen to you in English, translating to Tongan, and then answer back in English, and then speak. So I was challenged.
Answer yourself in your head in Tongan, right? And then you translate that into English. Yeah.
That was the biggest challenge, and my bishop told me, if you're going to teach a class, Sunday school, eventually you will think in English and speak in English without doing any translation. And he was right. My bishop at the time was Bishop John Nuina. He's one of those presidents of PCC. Great man, and never forgotten his counsel and advice to me.
Yeah, and if you can get to that point, I got to a point when I was in Tonga where I remember being in the mission office, and I was on my left-hand side was a Tongan missionary, and I spoke Tongan to him, and then on my right-hand side was a Palangi elderly sister, and she had a question for me, and I turned right away, and I was able to answer her and converse with her in English immediately. But that was after I had been in the country for over a year and had developed my language. It took some time. As you know, it took me some time to learn that language to the point where I could converse like that. And I think anytime we're dealing with a foreign country, going to a place where there's a foreign language, the more we can immerse ourselves and become comfortable in that other language, then we can get to that point where we can converse easily in either language. But it takes work.
Yeah.
It takes effort. So
take a lot of effort.
I went the other night, I went to the Pohiva Krismasi in Bountiful.
Okay.
And it was beautiful, but all the speaking was in Tongan. And I had to listen very carefully to follow along because my Tongan language is not as good as it used to be. But my brain hurt afterwards. Right? And you think about students in school, any student in school who's really working hard to learn, their brain will hurt. But then when you add the component on there of learning a new language and understanding that new language, that makes that work even more difficult.
Yeah.
So as faculty, Palangi faculty, a lot of times they will interpret that type of behavior as inadequate comprehension. You're not understanding the concepts that I'm teaching. You're not intelligent, they might say. You're a slow learner. That's not necessarily true. It's just there's that barrier of the language. And so what instructors can do is, first of all, acknowledge that there is a challenge there, right? That's the first thing that we need to do when we're trying to change, is we need to acknowledge and recognize that students may come from a different educational system, where they're just simply not familiar with the current educational system that they're now in at the university level. And there are some things that seem commonplace because of the American system. If that's all you've known, you just assume that everyone is familiar with that, but that's not necessarily the case when you're dealing with students from other cultures. So instructors can also provide some background information or prerequisite information for the class to make sure that those students have the foundation, have the background that they need in order to be successful. They might allow some flexibility on when assignments are submitted, and again, understanding the culture, or at least understanding that there is a difference in culture.
Yeah, and as a student, if you understood these things that we discussed today, when you see the instructor, you can tell by their facial expression that, maybe they don't understand what I'm asking, Then you step up at that point and they say, what I'm saying is this, something like that, so that after the conversation, you left and the teacher is left, both understood each other.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And I don't think it means that the instructor has to give up their expectations for performance in the class.
Yeah.
In fact, they shouldn't, because in many cases, the expectations of a class, in my classroom, I'm preparing students to be successful in a particular career. And so a lot of it is skills-based education, and they have to develop these skills in order to be successful in their career. And so I'm not going to relinquish those expectations, but the way that a student may achieve those expectations may change.
Yes. Always raise the expectation. It's always good. And then you support the students to reach it. Because when they reach it on their own after your support, it means a whole world of difference to them, that they have accomplished a great deal.
Yeah.
So our time is up, and so we can finish this off in the next month. Those are very good slides with informations there.
Yeah, and you can provide these slides for people to access right on your website.
Yeah.
So they can review that information. And again, I think the key here is understanding. Right? That's what we're getting at, is let's try to understand each other, whether you're a student, whether you're a faculty member, or whether you're a parent or someone else supporting a student. We all can try to understand one another better and communicate clearly. Then we can have a more successful experience. And remember that teachers, 99% of teachers out there want to see their students succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to see our students be successful. And so we want to do those things that will help them to be there and get there.
Yeah. Malo pito Dr. Thomas.
Malo apito afa.
Iyo ofatwe.
Ofatu.
PowerPoint kuya Dr. Thomas Howard. Email may send mo ho email substation kuia I Solid City, Utah. Whamawhala laia kuia down in Provo, Utah. Substation kuia kuhoa Kentucky. Provo BYU substation. Paina Pau Asapau, Dr. Kimani, Dr. Thomas Alaki de Kekin, Paina Lava Leria, el programa es así, como me